Hi, I'm Professor Green, and we'll be talking about Chapter 7 today, Supporting Your Ideas. This is all taken from the textbook called thepublicspeakingproject.org. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, first we'll be talking about an introduction to this chapter today, and then we're going to go into the four main subpoints. So the personal and professional knowledge, your library resources, your internet resources, and then ways to cite resources and avoid plagiarism. Let's go ahead and get started. Introduction. So first and foremost, right, effective speeches offer support for your ideas. A combination of online and in-person research called secondary and primary research. I highly recommend that you back up your research online on Google or different websites with talking to people. So valuable. Interviewing people is called primary research, right? Because you're talking to an expert, you're talking to someone directly. When I was in business school, I did a lot of primary research, and in graduate school in general. You talk to a lot of people to find out their experience, their research. So I know that a lot of you are going to be excited to do your research all online, but I highly recommend doing a combination. It is so valuable and so interesting. And for me personally, I find primary research much more exciting and much more fun to do than secondary research. In your purpose statement, that's going to help you guide your research. So as you go through and do your research, you're going to ask yourself, does this evidence support the goals of my speech? So you're going to be reading and reading and reading, and you're going to find so much information, and you're going to really question then, does it support the goal of my speech? So say, for example, your speech is all about saving the planet. You're going to have to focus on just one specific area of saving the planet, right? Because it's only a 6 to 8 minute speech typically. And so maybe you're going to talk about just the oceans. And so when you do this research and you start hearing about information that talks about saving the rivers or saving the lakes or saving the animals, that's not part of your purpose statement, right? You're talking about just saving the oceans. Good. Let's go ahead and, I think the slide that the information, so if the information contradicts your information, hold on to it so that you can address it later. That's right, because you want to make sure that you always address the opposition. So important, especially when you read things, right? You want to make sure that the author is addressing both sides because that makes them so much more credible. So if you're doing information during a topic about saving the oceans and then someone says that we don't need to save the oceans, that the oceans are just fine, you want to say that because you want to bring that up during your speech, and you want to say there is someone out there that says that we don't need to save the oceans, and this is what I believe or think about his conclusion. And so the other point here is if it agrees, ask if it's appropriate for my audience. And so that's what I was just saying, because that happens more than once, right? So again, we're not talking about saving lakes, animals, etc. We're only talking about saving the oceans. And also, is it on the level that my audience will understand, right? Who am I speaking to? Am I speaking to high school students? Am I speaking to kindergartners, right? Or am I speaking to experts on saving the ocean, right? My cousin, she's a toxicologist. She lives in Honolulu, Hawaii, and she works for the U.S. Navy. And she talks about saving the oceans as her full-time job, right? So she knows a lot about saving the oceans. So if you're going to deliver a speech to her, you want to make it much more sophisticated, right? As opposed to as if you're speaking it to kindergartner and making it a lot more basic. So let's go ahead and keep going. We're going to talk about using personal and professional knowledge. Oh, not sure why my slides here seem to sometimes jump. So let's make sure that we're going back. Let me try this one more time. Okay, personal and professional knowledge. We don't want to end this course quite yet or end this set of slides. We want to talk about here. Feel free to draw on your personal experience, right? So if you choose to talk about video games and you've spent a lot of time playing video games, then tell us that. That's awesome. We want to know why you're interested in this topic. We want to know why you decided to study this, and because you have some previous information that we can build upon. We also want to talk about your personal testimony. Have the audience understand your firsthand experience via story. And also, as we said, as I just said, it enhances your credibility. It makes your speech more memorable, right? And we also want you to practice as well. And then we want you to here. Oh yeah, I already spoke about interviews. I got carried away because I'm so passionate about interviews. But going into those details, it's expert testimony. And we want to set up the interview and prepare questions ahead of time, right? As I said, I love interviews. I spent a lot of time and effort in business school doing that. And I had clients in Germany. And before they would buy me the plane ticket to go to Germany to meet people, I had to already set up my 7 days of interviews and show them who I was meeting with and when, because they were not going to pay for me to just fly to Germany to go to Oktoberfest, right? Or to drink beer and have fun. They wanted to make sure that I was going to come back with information that was valuable. So I needed to set up my schedule way ahead of time. And so an interview that you might have is perhaps interviewing a Red Cross employee if you were delivering a speech on emergency preparedness. So again, you don't need to fly to Germany to have good personal knowledge or personal testimony for your speech, but maybe you can interview someone in your local environment for your speech. Okay, let's go ahead and keep going. Now we're going to talk about library resources. So this is secondary research. The first thing you should know about library resources is talk to someone. Ask a librarian for help. They are so, so valuable. The librarian has a master's in what's called library science. They have spent years studying how to do research. So, and they are so passionate about it. They are really interested, and I have never found a librarian that would turn me away. They are just so nice, and so really use them. When you go in there, you know, they're usually not busy. They're reading or sorting things. Now you can access them via Zoom. They are so, so valuable. So reach out to your librarian to do some research, because they know a lot more than you know about Google. And I'm going to tell you about that. So first thing is books. Books are comprehensive amounts of information, super helpful, super useful. When a book gets published, it's a big deal, right? There are editors involved. There are potentially multiple authors. There have been years of research gone into actually creating this book, because it costs a lot of money to print a book, right? Because you don't print just one book, right? These days, you print lots of books, and so in order to come up with the money, they have a lot of research to do that, and so books are great resources. But periodicals can be more up to date than books, right? Because books take years to come out. So periodical magazines and things come out faster. So often a lot of great information in a magazine. And the difference between a general interest periodical and academic journals. So you don't want to use a magazine like GQ or cosmopolitan.com, right? You want to use an academic journal, Harvard Law Review, Journal of Health Communication. So again, all of those are found in your library or in your database. And as a Compton College student or as a student at any college, you have access to all these amazing databases for these articles. And so that brings us into our fourth point, full text databases. You have access to citation, abstracts, articles, and an example of a database is LexisNexis. And you have a membership to that as a student. And if you weren't a student and wanted to get access to LexisNexis, I think it's between $8,000 and $10,000 a year these days to have access. So there's lots of great information, and it costs so much because people spend years of their lives dedicated to doing research and publishing that research, right? So somebody has to pay for that research. And so that's how the system works, that we pay them for the research. Now the college pays for the research, and then that is now accessible to you, the student. So please use this course. There's not a huge heavy workload in this course, but please use your time wisely and reach out to your library to get the best information that you can. Great. So now let's hop on to internet resources, because you say, why can't I just Google something? Well, you can, but let's talk about it. Yeah, you can Google search engines. That totally works. That's fine. But you want to define your search terms. You want to be as specific as possible. And you want to use not only Google, but what's called Google Scholar, Google Books, Google Images. Google Scholar is amazing because it makes these databases that used to be lots and lots of money more accessible. Not all databases are on Google Scholar, which is why we have things like LexisNexis and why we're a student and why we have access to those things. But Google Scholar more and more has things that used to not be available to us unless we were a student. So use Google Scholar because it'll point you to a source that's always much more credible than just using Google. So if you do use a website, though, ensure that it's a credible source. So as I said, GQ magazine, some great authors in there, very talented authors, but not necessarily credible. Cosmopolitan magazine, not credible anymore. CNN, you really need to question. New York Times, again, you need to question these authors. Journalism is changing, right? So if you find a website that you think is credible, you need to back up that information with 2 or 3 other websites that state the same information or similar information. A great place to get credible documents is in these census reports, health reports, crime statistics, and this website, fedworld.gov. Right now, we're going through a census. Year 2020, you might have gotten a letter, your parents might have gotten a letter saying that they need to complete their census. And what this does is it collects information about the citizens of the United States. So it finds out how old you are, what level of education you have, different things so that they can collect information that is then credible and they can then base research on that. So again, talking about evaluating your information, as I've alluded to already in this chapter, you really want to question the information. So you want to ensure that the source explains the reasoning behind the claim that it offers, right? So why do they say such and such information? Why do they say that, 20% of people die of heart disease in this country, right? Is this a source that is promoting medicine for heart disease? Then maybe is that information really correct? Let's go out and find some other information, maybe using fedworld.gov to research heart disease, right? So you really want to question it. And you want to determine if it considers competing perspectives. As I mentioned before, if you find information that when you're looking for information about the ocean and somebody says the oceans don't need to be saved, okay, I'm gonna really look into this and how did he get that information, and I'm gonna include that in my speech because I want people to know that I did my research. And if anybody out there thinks that this ocean should not be saved, I want them to know that I actually did research on this, right? So when you deliver your speech or when you read information, you want to make sure that it considers the competing perspective, right? Especially in this political world. And you want to determine if it has credible sources and if it offers supporting data and not just opinion, right? So for a lot of you now, you might be in families where you're discussing the upcoming election. For me personally, I always love hearing both sides of the story. Okay, maybe I will vote one way, but I always want to hear both sides. My parents are actually on the opposite sides, and I love hearing them both speak because it's just so interesting. They both bring a different perspective. They're talking about similar issues. I love talking to their friends who have different opinions. So for me, the election is so exciting because I get to hear about different perspectives, not just one. So yeah, please, include this in your research because we definitely don't want people coming and delivering speeches with a bias. Okay, and so our last section of this topic is citing resources and avoiding plagiarism, right? So we're going to talk here about style guides. In other courses, you might have used references or resources for the MLA or the CMS, but in communications, we use the APA style. Okay, and to find the APA style, you can refer to what's called the Purdue OWL or apastyle.org or bidme.org. That's another source. And obviously, we're going to do all this because we're avoiding plagiarism. I'm going to go into some examples of how to cite your sources. But the reason that we come up with our 10 sources is because we want to make sure that we are credible and we're not just cutting and pasting from any particular source, right? That we want to make sure that we reword information that we find. And if we're going to cut and paste the statistics, like for example, that 20% of people die from heart disease, we want to make sure that we cite that source, right? And so how do we cite that source? I'll tell you about that right now. And that's going to be the last section of our chapter. Let me go ahead and click out here. I'm going to go ahead and go into to Google, our friend Google. And so as you go through and you find a website or you find some information, you're going to say, okay, how do I cite this source? So all I do is I just put into Google, I want to cite a website in APA style. Let's say it doesn't have an author. I click enter. And now all these options on how do you reference a web page that has no author, citing online sources without an author or title in APA style. So all these different places. Here we go. owl.purdue.edu, reference list, authors, Purdue Writing Lab, etc. So all these different places. I'm going to choose this one here, apastyle.apa.org. How do you reference a web page that lists no author? Here's what you're going to put in your reference list, right? So it doesn't have an author, so I don't start with the author's name, but I start with the title, period, and then the date in parentheses, right, period, retrieved from, and then the link to the actual article. Okay, so that's all I need to see on a list, a piece of paper with 10 different references. And maybe I have a book, APA style, citation, etc. So I'm going to click and here. So how to cite, okay, so lots of different places. Maybe I'll choose Easy Bib for this one. So same idea, how to format a book citation. So you read a book and now you want to include that in your list of citations. And here is the example. So I put the author, Henry James, 2009. The title is The Ambassadors. It was published in Rockville, Maryland by Serenity Publishers. As you can see, these sites are all free because there are lots of advertisements here, which are somewhat distracting. But they have here an ebook from an e-reader, etc., etc. So really easy to get your citations. If you're not sure what a list of references looks like, you can also Google that too. List of references, APA style. So some of you have done this a lot, so I don't go into a whole lot of detail, but some of you have not done it at all. So we just want to make sure that it's clear what it is that you're doing. So I put list of references, APA style, here from bidme.org. I'm going to see if I can pull this up easily enough. Again, there are lots of ads on here, so sometimes I don't prefer to do this in class because it is quite complicated with all these ads popping up. Hopefully you're not getting distracted, but that's the idea of, it's going to walk you through here, what a snapshot of the basics, citation components, how to structure authors, APA format, multiple authors, multiple names, etc. Okay, and how to structure the title, etc., etc. So again, lots of information. I will just click back to the original. So this is what it would look like, right? References, and as you can hopefully see, okay, let me see if I can move my person. Okay, here, references, the person's name, the date, the title, the journal, etc., etc. So lots of different examples of what this looks like. Here, they call it works cited. That's fine too. You'll notice that the first line is not indented and the second and the third lines are indented. So that's a big thing that people will often forget. Great, so hopefully that makes a whole lot of sense. This was chapter 7, supporting your ideas. I am Professor Green. Thank you so much for coming. This is all coming from the Public Speaking Project. I appreciate your showing up today, and please let me know if you have any questions. Have a great day.